Hello and welcome to another chat. This one's going to be about Russian submarine capabilities, looking at where they're at now and where they like to be at in the future. Bad news for Russia. I am H.I. Sutton. I'm an independent defense analyst focused on unconventional warfare, particularly submarines. If you follow this channel, you're probably noticing already that it looks a bit different. This is not a presentation I wrote for or created for YouTube. Rather, it's a talk I gave at a conference, and I thought I should do a version of this talk for YouTube. Obviously, I've taken some things out, but I've added some stuff in as well to make the story clearer. So hopefully it's interesting. Unscripted, unedited, obvious already, I know. Let's get on with it. I've got to get this out of the way first, I think. Important to realize that Russian submarine capabilities are their most potent and capable military capability, I'd say, particularly the nuclear submarines, like this one here. They are on a par with Royal Navy, US Navy submarines. Some people will be surprised to hear that. That is the view within the submarine community, within the defense analysis community. Obviously, pros and cons, so on, but they are not far behind, that's for sure. Very serious threat, very elusive, difficult to deal with. If they're competently commanded, and they are, then they're real problems. But let's look at the newer submarines being built. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. Let's look at the newer submarines being built. There's two classes currently under construction. The Bore is a ballistic missile submarine, and the Yasen is a cruise missile submarine. As I say, these are comparable to Western designs. There are 7 Bores in service and 5 Yasens in service. And Russia is going to continue building submarines like this. There's quite a few planned. In fact, there's a big sort of spending spree expected or claimed in Russia. 100 billion US dollars, 75 billion pounds thereabouts over the next 10 years on submarines and warships, of course. To sort of figure out how much that is, one of those Yasen submarines that we just shown a picture of, that costs approximately 1.2 billion today. Caveats on this estimation have just sort of adjusted for inflation, the price from 2011, but it's not so far off. Submarines don't necessarily cost the same amount of money in Russia than they do in other countries to build. By this mark, that budget gives you about 60 Yasens. Now, they're not going to spend it on 60 Yasens, but it gives you an idea of scale. It's a lot of money. Having said that, this is the end of the good news for Russian submarines. The rest of the talk is pretty much about how bad the situation is for Russian submarines. Now that we've got it out of the way, that they are to be taken very seriously, they're really got some problems. Firstly, they've got a war economy. How much of this money is actually going to be spent? Will it be available? They're particularly susceptible to oil prices. I'll leave it for economists to explain this one, but if oil prices remain low, then they're going to really struggle to find the money. They might get some good news. The war in the Middle East could actually increase oil prices. If that's sustained over a long period of time, maybe they'll actually get a little bit more money coming around. But either way, they've still got very limited exports on oil and other exports, of course. So where's the money coming from? We can already see this having an impact on the latest submarines that they're meant to be built that aren't the Yasens or the Bores. The Kursk submarine is still under construction. It has been under construction for over a decade, I think, going by, that's a guess. It's certainly a lot of years. I'm pretty sure it's over a decade. I have to check it. But it's way overdue. And it's been delayed a little bit by COVID, but now it can't just be COVID. It's got to be more than that. It's economy. Similarly, the Laker class, or also known as the Husky class, that's the next generation attack submarine. We had a certain amount of information about it a few years ago. It's gone really quiet. So this would be the equivalent of the SSNX in America or the SSNR in or AUKUS rather in United Kingdom. We're not hearing about it. It's possibly shelved, certainly not part of the topic. So yes, Russia is building lots of submarines, but it's not building the next generation of submarine. Another thing that's not happening quite as the media would have you believe is the Zircon missile, one of those mythical super weapons. We know a little bit more about it now because Russia has used some of them in Ukraine. So there's some debris of one. This is a hypersonic anti-ship and land attack cruise missile. There's a photograph of it being launched from a frigate. Obviously, you couldn't get an equivalent photograph from a submarine. Shows it quite well. Still got the nose cap on. It's just come out the tube. How many Russian submarines can actually carry this? Possibly the first submarine, Severodvinsk, was claimed to have done test launches, not been able to validate that it really did do the test launches. But more tellingly, the latest of the new Severodvinsk 2 of the Yasen M class submarines, Perm, which was launched just a couple of months ago, there was a lot of chatter in Russia that this was the submarine to carry Zircon. The inference, I think the right interpretation is that the first of the Yasen class submarines can't actually carry it. So it's been a notional capability that even my own website has been listing for a few years now. It's not actually out there in service. It's not as widely deployed as Russia would want you to believe. And its submarines, probably none of them are carrying it yet. Also, it's not just Yasins. Russia also has a fleet of legacy, older designs, mainly Cold War ones. So the Akulas, some Sierras, and Oscar class submarines. These, again, are very capable, but they are long in the tooth. A lot of them are going through refits. With those refits come upgrades, but the upgrades, again, are not as extensive or as impressive as the Russian media would have you believe. I think that most of those submarines cannot yet carry caliber cruise missiles, for example. So even some of the articles I've done in the past were taking a pessimistic or optimistic, depending on your perspective, view of Russian submarines. The view was that pretty much all submarines were going to be able to carry caliber and and all the ones with vertical launch tubes, all the Yasins were going to be able to carry Zircon. Doesn't seem to be the case. Again, most easiest explanation is money. And then there's the diesel boats. Russia doesn't only have nuclear submarines, it also has diesel submarines. The main type is still the Kilo. 13 are in service, more are building. This is a Cold War legacy design, has been upgraded, but definitely you can say it's designed in the 70s. In the Black Sea, they actually lost one of them. So Ukrainian operated cruise missile, generally attributed to Storm Shadow. That's definitely out of service. That's not going anywhere. But there's a hidden problem. It's maybe lost or losing more of its submarines. A lot of the parts on the latest latest Kilo submarines, the ones were built in the last 10, 15 years, are Western parts, lots of Western components. There's been an effort to remove these, replace them with Chinese or locally sourced parts, and this is a lot of problems. It's causing a lot of reliability and availability issues. We know a little bit about this from rumors, if you like, unofficial reporting in Russia, but I'm giving it some credence. It really resonates with the situation as we were expecting it. Yeah, and that's really bad news from Russia's perspective. What's worse, the new generation of submarine that was meant to replace or supersede the Kilos, the Lada class, has its own problems. The first boat was so buggy that it was actually decommissioned early. So a new submarine, and it's already out of service. But there are two active, and they're now three under construction. So it's not the end of the road for the Ladas. But these submarines aren't necessarily cutting edge in comparison to those being fielded by many other countries, not least China, but including countries in East Asia and Europe. In particular, they don't have any air-independent power or equivalent modern batteries or any other solution that could be an equivalent to air-independent power. That's ironic because Russia historically, or Soviet Union, was quite far ahead in its adoption of air-independent propulsion back in the 1950s. It really lost its edge. So these submarines, they have some merits, but they are broadly behind and definitely not performing as hoped. Then we come on to the super weapons, of course. Always got to be careful when assessing super weapons. There's a lot of sort of hype and myth out there. The Poseidon is a giant torpedo. It is nuclear powered, nuclear armed. It requires a specially fitted submarine. So it's also incredibly expensive, not just to acquire the the weapon, but also the launch platform. We don't understand it. There's a lot that doesn't make sense here. But I would caution about assuming that just because we don't understand it means it's not real or it's fake. It is real. Um, they're just under no obligation to make sense to us. What we can say though is it's going to be incredibly difficult to counter. So in that respect, it's quite an effective, uh, yeah, in some respects, an effective weapon. But and for me, the hang up and what I don't understand is whether it's a tactical weapon or a strategic weapon. Is it going to be used against aircraft carriers or is it going against New York and um, London? The submarine to carry it, the only submarine to carry it is the Belgrad. I'm just going to add, yes, I'm aware of this Sarov. Check my website for that, but let's not count that. So I'm just preempting some questions there. Um, this submarine has its own problems. At the front, it has the canyon or the Poseidon, same weapon, just different names, mega torpedo. And then in amidships, it has a whole seabed warfare capability, different payloads, midget submarines, autonomous underwater vehicles. So it's somewhat schizophrenic. It's got two conflicting or complicated roles. And it's not clear which role it's meant to be doing. But what we can say is the submarine itself is still in Severodvinsk, which is the port where it's built, launched, tested. So even though it's been in service, in commission for years, it is not yet really truly operational, I'd say. And it's not clear whether its role is seabed warfare or Poseidon. I would bet toward Poseidon, but you know, definitely not clear. In particular, it's likely to be delayed because if it was going to be used for seabed warfare, the submarine that it was going to carry, the Lashkarik, is still undergoing repairs. Very delayed repairs, largely due to its complex titanium hull, I suspect. As I mentioned, there's ambiguity about the role. Talking of seabed warfare submarines, Russia still has a massive fleet of these, biggest fleet in the world by far. These are the biggest submarines in the world. They are spy submarines, if you like. Belgrade would be added to these. A lot of them are not available. The service, Lashkarik, as I mentioned, is in refit and has been for years repairs, but they're still out there. What's confusing about seabed warfare submarines, they're not being used in the recent spate of seabed incidents. We're talking about anchor dragging and potentially attacks on underwater pipelines and so on. If Russia is behind these, and I make some cases for that in other videos, I think, Googie, the organization that has these spy submarines, isn't very much involved. It still exists. It hasn't been sent to the front. Here it is parading quite recently. So the unit is still important, is still protected from the trenches of Ukraine, but what its relevance is not so clear. What I'd say about these submarines is that although it has a lot of them, they were designed for the Cold War seabed warfare environment. In recent years, with seabed warfare suddenly becoming a thing you do during hybrid wars, other organizations, other capabilities are starting to creep into that space. So it's not clear quite what the Googie's role will be. Another area where there's a lot of, or not a lot happening, is extra large uncrewed underwater vehicles. This is a real growth area in other countries, obviously United States, Royal Navy, but also many other countries around the world. Russia does have some design bureaus that are building or working on these projects, but they've gone very quiet. And possibly they're working in secret, possibly have ones that I'm not aware of. But I think what's really happening is that it's gone to back. It's been overshadowed by the war in Ukraine and more urgent needs. And in particular, in the uncrewed space, not a submarine, but the small boats that Ukraine is using, the USVs, uncrewed service vessels, Russia is starting to copy them. Here's a Russian design. We like to see Russia deploy these more and more. And in the uncrewed space, this is the happening thing, not the extra large uncrewed underwater vehicles. Okay, so let's wrap it up. I say this wasn't developed um, for YouTube, and I'm not sure if the story's been as coherent as I want it, but in short, let's watch out for the launch of the Cabral submarine and other new submarines. See whether, if the longer they're delayed, the worse the implications for the Russian submarine capabilities overall. If they can't launch the submarines that have been under construction for years, they've got real problems. Gugi mentioned, does it need modernization? This is the seabed warfare submarines. Are they going to be more or less relevant in the future? Seabed warfare undoubtedly is more and will be more relevant in the future. But is it these submarines? Is that how Russia is going to have that capability? And uncrewed underwater vehicles, it really appears that Russia has missed the boat on this. So watch out for those. Okay, thank you. Please like, subscribe. Thank you.